Hello, everyone. Thank you for another episode at Everyday Leadership. We have with us today is Vikram Kone. Vikram is a senior data engineering manager at Meta, working on trust and safety team where he supports multiple teams responsible for keeping Facebook Messenger, Instagram safe from abusive users and harmful content using AI. He previously worked at Microsoft where he built really scalable technologies there. um, but otherwise, welcome, Vikram. Love to hear a lot about how you got to where you are today, and then would love to really understand what goes into your life on a regular day-to-day basis at Meta, and what are some of the things that you work on, and some of the challenges that you have, and would also love to explore a bit of uh, questions around how you manage people and how you really build culture of where people are rowing in one direction, and that how you also articulate a lot of strategy and focus related narratives into your team. But with that, so let's start with a quick introduction about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Yeah. Say hi. Thanks for having me, Pradeep. This was interesting to chat about. Just for a quick intro, so I started my career back in 2008. Started as a software engineer at Microsoft. Initially started working on building web services and then building mobile apps. And then slowly I moved into a tech lead role at the end of my career at Microsoft after roughly around 8 years being an IC. Last 2 years, I was a tech lead on the team, building a data processing tool to show some productivity insights within Outlook app. So I caught the management bug after the tech leading stint. So I applied for some manager roles outside. I wanted a change. So that's when I got into Meta after Microsoft. And I've been in the same team since I joined, which is the trust and safety team, where I'm supporting multiple teams, mainly focused on using AI to remove bad stuff from our apps so that people like you and others who use our apps don't see those things. So that's what we do. My background is being, so I did my bachelor's in electronics engineering and then master's in computer science. And then I've been working for almost 15 years now.
Awesome. Also, talk about one of the interesting transitions that folks make after spending a decent amount of time doing all kinds of technical things is to transition into a managerial position. Is that a natural transition, or is that something that you have to make in order to really have that impact that you would love to as you grow in seniority or gain a lot of experience?
Yeah, so I think in my case, it was more natural because I had kind of a bent towards it at the end of my stint at Microsoft. I initially wanted to try it out because I was getting kind of bored with the day-to-day IC work. So I wanted to see what the other side of the aisle looks like. So that's when I went and talked to my manager that, hey, I'm not feeling really challenged with the IC work and I want to improve more on the soft skills side. So that's when he advised me to go into the tech lead role to see if that is something that I would enjoy. And if I do that well, then he said, then you can think about, completely switching over. So the tech lead role is kind of a mix of individual contributor with some kind of management thrown in. So you are not directly responsible for people, but you are still managing them from a technical standpoint. So I did that for 2 years and I liked it. I felt that I could have more impact through others than what I was able to do by myself. So that's when I decided to switch. And yeah, it worked out for me so far.
And what did you see after you made the transition? So what are some surprises, and what are some challenges around managing people, because people come in various shapes and sizes, and just to say, uh, but I'm just curious, like, were there any surprises, and what were, in retrospect, from where you were before you made the transition, when you look back, how do you reflect the transition?
Sure. So I think when I was an IC, I had this notion or misconception that managers were just sitting in meetings all day and not adding real value, right? So I always felt that the ICs are the ones who are actually doing real work, and management chain is just overhead, right? Because I was not able to see what is the value they are bringing. Because from my point of view, they were just like setting up stand-ups, creating strategy docs, and basically running meetings where decisions are being made and things like that, which I felt even senior ICs could do with enough coaching. So wasn't really sure what value add they're bringing. But once I did transition, the one thing that really surprised me was a lot of work that happens behind the scenes for teams to actually even start working on a project, right? You only see, like as an IC, you see from once the work comes to you, that's when you see, hey, this is what I need to do for my team to be successful or for me to meet my organization goals. But to come to that point, there's a lot of legwork that happens behind the scenes, and that's where managers really, really bring a lot of value. And the experience of them have been worked in this field or worked in similar domains before helps really like cut down all the noise and focus the team on working on the right things. That I felt was really important, because without doing that, people can write a bunch of code or work on a lot of dead end projects which will not have any impact, right? So bringing that focus is really managers' real contribution. And of course, like maintaining the team health, bringing redundancies to the people, making sure everybody's aligned and things like that, all are secondary. But in my mind, the main thing is bringing focus to your work and aligning the team.
No, I can't agree more. I think bringing focus where you could be sitting there writing code all day, all night, but if that is not accounting to something what people want,
Uh,
and I think bringing that focus is in my opinion is extremely important, especially when there are a group of people. How do you really channel all their energy and harness them in a certain way? So with that, I'm wondering if you I would be very curious to hear some of the managerial stories that you have from your experience. Let's not put any bounding box around the story, so I will let you just you know uh, talk about stories that are worth telling. At the same time, I also want to know if you have any stories around bringing focus, and if you have any particular example at Meta in the way you brought focus and really added value. That'll be curious for all the listeners to sort of understand.
sure. Yeah. So to answer your first question, I guess one of the managerial stories that I'd like to share probably would be this would be a continuation to your earlier question. Like one of the surprises, which is also learning experience for me, was like when you become a manager, you kind of also play a role as a therapist to your team, right? Because you are not only just talking about technical things day to day, but you're also knowing about their personal problems, how their relationships are going, how their kids are feeling, and all of that. And it's just not, you're working with people end of the day, right? You're not just working with machines. So that aspect is definitely a learned, acquired skill, I would say, and a learned behavior that you don't know it until you are in it. Like, hey, I now need to talk to you about these things as well. It's not just about code and how performant the system is and things like that. So one of my initial teams, there was a guy on my team uh, who I won't name for obvious reasons, but he came to me one day and said, "Hey, Vikram, I'm having like struggle meeting the deadlines. So can you help me move this? Like, talk to my XFN, like cross-functional partners, to move these deadlines by a month or so." And I was taken aback because he's one of the top performers on my team, and I never have expected something like that coming from him. out of nowhere, like this, there's no indications of this coming from any of our previous one-on-ones and things like that. So when I asked him, like, hey, what's happening? Why do you want to push the deadline? Like, what is the real reason behind it? Is the project too complex, or were the requirements not very clear from the beginning? Do we need to chase down or rescope the project? What's really happening here? The thing he said was that I'm actually like having struggles at my home with my girlfriend, and that is actually causing me a lot of stress and anxiety. And then I'm taking depression related medications for the last month and a half. And during this period, I have hardly any time to focus on work. So I'm like literally spending 1 to 2 hours in an 8 hour day doing work, and the rest of the time I'm in a haze, right? Like I would never have in a million years thought about somebody talking about this in a work context with me. For friends, yes, but in a work context, when somebody brings this up, like how do you deal with that, right? Like at a personal level, you still want to be respectful and mindful about their personal problem. At the same time, you also have to balance that with what the team needs, right? Like if you miss this deadline, there's a big launch coming up, and we will have a bad look with our management as well. So that was a real hard problem for me initially because I didn't know how to deal with it. Like, what should I tell him, right? Like, is it okay to take a week off or a month off and you are your own P0, right? Your health is more important than any other product or any other work. Or should I do that work myself, take it on myself and do it? Or should I put it on somebody else on the team and now increase their burden, right? There's no good options, right? It's all tough decisions. So that's I grappled with it a lot, and at the end of the day, I went to my manager to ask for advice on how to deal with it. And the thing that he told me, which I still follow to this day, was if a person is having a problem and they're not being 100% at their work, it's best to give them time to recover so that when they come back, they will be give 10x more so they can come back and recover and do more work than they were doing before. And that's the right thing to do, even though it will cause a temporary setback to the team goals. So that never ever put team goals in front of people's personal issues. And that's one thing. The second thing he said was, don't ever try to do an IC work as a manager because you don't want to inconvenience other people on the team. Things like that. That's not the right way to set up the team. The team should be always set up to load balance when these kind of issues happen. People go on leaves, people go on sudden leaves because of family issues or something, right? So it should always be redundancy in the team so that if it's a primary and secondary for each project, so one person is not available, other person can pick up the slack. And you can work with your partner teams to kind of set the expectations about resource constraints and move the deadlines as possible. So I think that's one of the main things that I think an interesting story that I always tell new managers also when I start supporting them about how to handle these kind of situations more gracefully than I did.
No, absolutely. That is such a great demonstration of empathy. And I think that also pays back in an interesting way, right? So that's part of giving an assurance to the engineer, at the same time creating that psychological safety, and also giving him a sense of, hey, you're being taken care of. And all those things really matter. When the engineer comes back, he's going to, like your boss, your manager said, so he's going to come back with a lot of energy and he will contribute more. But to be able to make those exceptions are only also possible when you have a team that can load balance itself as well. Like, you're not jeopardizing the team at the same time. You have
Exactly.
somebody that can take over. But yeah, I think that's a great place to be with a team. But getting there as a team is also very interesting. So would love to understand a couple of things. And how do you set up a team to sort of start functioning itself on its own, where you have taken care of all these? There's no single point of failures in the team. You can load balance. I wonder what strategies do you have to get a team to that position, At the same time, how do you keep a pulse on the team? Like, how do you know at any given point what is the health of the team? How is it doing, and where are you with the status in terms of all the work that each one of them is sort of working on at any given point of time?
Sure. So I think that there are two parts to your question, right? The first part was like, how do you make sure the team is aligned and working in one direction, right? As a team, as one cohesive unit. And the second part of your question was, how do you have a pulse check on your team's health? So I'll
Mhm.
answer those two things separately, right? For the team alignment and the making sure they are working as a unit and working well, I think it starts from the very beginning when we are setting up roadmaps, right? Like I said, Meta, we have a half yearly roadmap process. So every 6 months, the team gets together and works towards creating a canonical document to decide what the team should work. The team is not like data engineers or analytics or researchers or software engineers or QA. It's like the whole XFN we call here, which is the cross-functional group, like a pod. They all come together and come up with these like objectives and goals. Right. Again, these objectives and goals come trickling down from the upper upper layers, right? So the VP, it gives a strategic direction to the org. Then the directors whittle down and add some more clarity and some more details, next level details to those top level, org level goals. And then when it comes from directors to managers, senior managers like me, then we add a little more detail and more depth to all of those objectives and goals, right? So it starts from those. So having clear and concise goals for the beginning of the road mapping season is really important. I think if you don't have that, everything else falls apart. So I think that's a very, very basic thing that you need to get right. And once that is done, I think the second part is like communicating about these goals and objectives very openly with your team, right? I've seen cases where people assume, like especially as managers, we assume everybody has the same context behind why these goals are set up, but it's often not the case. So it's up to you as a manager to make sure everybody understands why, not only what the goals are, but why these goals have been set up, why these objectives have been set up. So for that, I send like weekly emails are like top of my mind on like what we should be focusing on, and what everybody on the team is working on, so that everybody is aware of each other's projects and their progress as well. So top of mind emails is one of the ways I try to communicate with my team regularly. The third thing I would say is like you have to, when you're having these projects which are very, very cutthroat in the sense they're very deadline intensive. Like every project always seems like we don't have enough people or not enough time to finish them. So it's always goes very close to the wire every time without a mistake. So I think what's important in those situations is to make sure that we're celebrating the people's milestones, the project milestones, and celebrating the goals when they achieve their impact, right? So that's really also important as a manager to make sure that you're taking a step back and congratulating the team or the person who has delivered the work. So they are invigorated and then they can come back and give more in the next project. So celebrating the team's wins is also really important. So I think three things essentially I said, which is um, road mapping and having like clear, concise goals is important. Communicating regularly with your teams about the goals and the context behind the goals is also helps. The third thing is celebrating the successes and holiday ways periodically. Yeah. So I think these are the three things I do to make my team work very well and aligned. Um, I think your second question was how do I keep the team health or sense share pulse check. So at Meta, we have this automated survey called Pulse, that is sent out every half, right? It's a company-wide thing that every person, every IC, and every manager gets. It's an anonymous survey which will have like 100+ questions about how the person is doing and what are the things they like about the company, the culture, about the immediate team, their work-life balance, and there are a bunch of different axes on all this, how these questions are framed. So this is a periodic thing that automatically happens without much of your need to do that. So once this, it runs for like a couple of weeks in a half, and then once the half is done, then the managers get the results, the anonymized aggregated results for their teams, and you get a score from 1 to 100 on how well your team is doing across dimensions. This we call this pulse scores, and this is one of the very important signal we use in the performance review meetings for managers. So if your pulse scores are low, which means your team is not doing well. So managers actually pay a lot of attention to make sure these pulse scores are up. But again, it's not like we're trying to game the system to get the score up just for just the score's sake, but we actually want to make sure the team is functioning well and team is healthy. I think for that, I always recommend my team members to be like not only use the pulse moments to provide feedback, but also use our regular one-on-ones to bring up any issues that they're seeing on a regular basis. You don't have to wait for every 6 months to bring these things up. So you have to build that culture on the team to be so that there's a culture of trust, right? So that they can trust you that when they give feedback, you're not going to retaliate. So bringing that, like I use one-on-ones for that to get the sense of the team is doing. I also talk to my partner teams regularly, like once a month. I have meetings with my product director, my engineering director, and things like that to see how they are seeing our team working well with their team members. So get like a 360-degree view from the person directly, from their partner teams, and then use that information to course correct as soon as possible instead of waiting for the pulse moments. So I hope that answers your question.
No, I think yeah, that's just to summarize, how do you make sure the team is rowing in the right direction and in one direction? You mentioned that one, being very clear and crisp about what you want to achieve on a 6-month cadence, and then making sure that is well taken care of, and then articulating that to your reportees using your top of minds on a regular basis. So you're pounding the message right into the engineers, and then you sort of keep track of, and also you celebrate the milestones when you achieve them. So that's interesting. And the I also want to sort of understand, and you sort of pulse check when you get a survey. This more like there's always this push and pull strategy, whether you get the feedback which is pushed up to you or you pull it. So this clearly looks like a pull strategy. So one quick question: how does it all work at Meta? Like, is it easy to? How do you celebrate milestones? So you send kudos to each other, or you send gift cards? What kind of celebrations, or how do celebrations work there?
Yeah, so there are multiple times we celebrate people, right? So pre-pandemic, right, we had this concept called Faceversary. I think now after the company's name is changed to Meta, it's now called Metaversary, which is like every year you complete in the company, like every year of service, that's called a 1-year Metaversary, like an anniversary essentially. At that moment, like the HR essentially, the team HR on the team will send you like a gift box, right? Like a box with a bunch of goodies, swag, and things like that. And managers also write a post about how well you did for the year. Thanks for all the contribution. This is how much impact you have, and they post it publicly in our internal tool called Workplace. I don't know if you heard about Workplace. It's basically Facebook groups, but for a work context. So you have that's what
is it a Meta's internal tool, or is there a company called Work?
Meta's tool which they actually sell to other companies as well now. But essentially it looks like a Facebook, right? A Facebook tool, like there's a feed and there's a bunch of groups that you can join. So the groups are team groups. If you know about Yammer, it's very similar to Yammer concept. Right? There's a feed and groups, and you can join the groups. And
is Yammer the company of David Sachs, the one he sold?
Yes. Yammer was built by David Sachs and was acquired by Microsoft actually, and merged with the teams. Microsoft Teams group. But it's a similar concept. So we use that very extensively within Meta for regular communication as well. Like everything is very public, right? We don't use email at all. Email is very, very less frequent at Meta. Everything is in workplace. So everything is public, strategy, documents, milestones, posts, everything is there. For project-specific deliverables on Kudos, I usually tend to send them a note in Workplace because it's visible to everybody. It's a public thing, and Workplace has this tooling in it where when you send a congratulations, it creates like a graphic and like confetti and balloons coming on your profile. Somebody visits them, and some placeholders in the UX that shows you some badges people have given you. Like not only as a manager you can give badges to people, but your coworkers can also give you badges. Other ways that we recognize people for their impact on work. So badges, metaversities, and the workplace congratulations reports. These are all the places or ways we recognize people and stuff like that.
As a manager, what kind of tools do you use, like, to manage your team? So if you were to list all the tools that you have in your kitty to make sure it's all up and functional and excited and fully motivated, what are those?
Yeah, so I think that the tools kits that I've used have changed over time, I would say. Previously, when I was at Microsoft, I was mostly using Excel spreadsheets for project tracking and task tracking. We did have an internal bug tool that we also used for task tracking, but it was not like a standard task tool per se, like a Jira. Microsoft didn't have that at the time. This was talking about like 6-7 years ago. I think now they must have something. But at the time, I was mainly using Excel spreadsheet to track all the projects and milestones and tasks and stuff like that. But at Meta, we have an internal tool, a tool called Tasks tool, where everything is organized. So it's a mix of Jira and also Asana. I don't know if you know Asana, but Asana is also a tool built by one of the co-founders of Facebook. So we use
Asana. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so we used to use Asana before, but now Facebook has built an in-house replica of the same tool, so we use that. So that's a tool that have these features like Kanban boards, right? Like the Trello kind of a view where you have boards or stacks that you can break down your projects into, or you can also see views where project dependencies all in this one tool. Is very, very, very good. So I use that tool pretty much day in, day out. That's the first thing that I check in the morning when I come in, like which tasks have progressed, which has finished, what is the burn down rate for our team, and are we meeting our goals, any hotspots there that I need to focus on, course correct. Other than tasks tool, mainly, as I said, Workplace is where I communicate with my team. We have also a chat app within Workplace called Workplace Chat, more for async communication, like more synchronous communication. So Workplace is more for async, right? Chat is more synchronous. If I want immediate feedback or something immediate answers, I use that for the team. But most of the project tracking, all of that is done with Tasks too, which is a very beautiful tool. Yeah.
Awesome. I know we are at time, but I have one last question, and we should do another series where we talk about how do you manage up,
Yep.
how does cross functional collaboration works, and how did you manage people out before? Like, what was that experience like? A lot of cool stuff. We can certainly do another round of this. But as a manager, do you get to make any purchase decisions for any software tools at Meta, or just curious? Do you have that power, or if you don't, who has that power, and what is the budgeting like?
Yeah, so from my experience so far, no, like any tool purchasing goes to a central product purchasing team. There's a separate team that handles that. But as engineering teams, we could obviously influence the team on what products to buy, right? So there are lots of people who try different tools out of curiosity, right? And they start slow, like within a sub team, like 3 to 4 people use this tool and get a free trial. and use it. And once they like it, they will ask more people to try, and then organically it gets more traction within the org. And
Hmm.
then somebody will escalate it to the product purchase team saying, hey, this is a tool people are excited about and they're using. We should think about, purchasing a license for it so that we can use it more, use the full feature set, right? So that kind of stuff happens. But what to buy is not directly in my hands usually, but I can usually give suggestions to the product purchase team on what tools the teams are using. Usually at Meta, we have a very high bar for using third-party tools because
Hmm.
we deal with a lot of privacy and sensitive data of our users,
Hmm.
right? So there's very, very high bar to use private third-party tools. We 99% of the time we try to use first-party tools built internally because
Hmm.
we can guarantee some security and
Hmm.
privacy for tooling, but doesn't mean there are not tools. There are tools like ServiceNow being used, Asana being used, Dropbox is another tool we use. So all of it, Zoom is the tool we use. So there's a bunch of third-party tools we do use, but the bar is very high and it goes up to the CEO to kind of approve this kind of tooling to be used in the company because of
Yeah,
the privacy.
who is the SSO provider that you guys use? Do you use Okta or uh,
Okta, yes,
Okta?
Facebook
Okay.
use Okta SSO.
No, this is awesome, Vikram. I really, really appreciate. I know you're very short on time, but really appreciate you doing this for me. And yeah, and this will be a great help for a lot of the folks who are trying to get into managerial positions, and also for those folks who just got in there and wanting to understand how things work for them. But this is a great session. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was nice chatting with you. Hope to chat with you again soon.
Thanks, Vikram. Bye.
Bye.